There are a lot of games that use pixel art. A lot. Indie Darling, Stardew Valley, Terraria, Hyperlight Drifter, Dead Cells, Little Witch in the Woods, and several others. Developers use pixel art for a number of reasons. One reason could be because of the resources they have available. Pixel art isn't challenging to get started making, and has a quicker workflow than using more detailed art or 3D models. This can make it more suitable for a smaller indie studio or even a one-man team like that behind Stardew Valley to develop a game. The first game prototype I ever created in Unity used pixel art. The simplicity of pixel art allowed me to easily create art assets using Procreate on my iPad and then upload them into my Unity project. Using pixel art made it quick and easy to create the first visual building blocks of my game world. Pixel art can be a good starting point for newbie game devs since there isn't as high of a learning curve and it's a much more accessible style. While I used Procreate on the iPad for the assets of that first prototype, I could have used Photoshop or Aseprite or even a free browser app like Pixel Art Maker. A second reason for using pixel art is that it's cool. It can give a game a really stylized aesthetic that can be made for really any theme. It gives constraints that you can get very creative with. Because pixel art doesn't give you a lot of the information about what you're looking at, there's room for the player to fill in the blanks. In the retro platformer Celeste, the avatar for Madeline doesn't even have a face during the gameplay, but the player still relates and connects with the emotions she's feeling. Because these games let the player fill in the blanks in some spots, it makes the experience of playing that game all the more personal and thus enjoyable. Pixel art also has nostalgic appeal. For many players, it's a callback to the 8-bit and 16-bit games for consoles like the NES and the Sega Genesis. This nostalgia is part of the reason why us developers may choose to go with pixel art. I think it's certainly why we have game engines that are designed for making these retro-style games. Pico 8 is one of these. It's a fantasy console and game engine that allows developers to write code, make sprites and world tiles, and produce 8-bit style music and sound effects for their games. In an interview for Nintendo Life, the developers shared how the first version of Celeste was originally created with Pico 8 in a 2015 game jam. Be it because of nostalgia or solely for the aesthetics of it, a lot of developers choose to use pixel art in their games. Some even go backwards, quote unquote, switching their games from using more rendered out styles to using pixel art styles. Dead Cells was originally going to use 3D models, but the developers decided to use pixel art and came up with a way to render the game's 3D models as pixel art when the game runs. Hyperlight Drifter also reportedly originally had a more detailed 2D art style. A lot of the early art for the game was high resolution, and the lead developer Alex Preston initially wanted to use high resolution art since he initially thought he was going to make an HD game. The developers ultimately decided to go with the pixel art style the game has today since it was more efficient and something a small team or a single person could realistically do. This game was a passion project for Preston, and according to an interview he did for Game Developer, he did want it to pay homage to the 8-bit and 16-bit games he grew up playing. This last reason isn't necessarily a common one, I don't think, but something that is bound to be explored more in the future. This is gameplay from the game Noita, an indie roguelite game where you play as a wizard that can use spells and wands to defeat enemies. You explore the underground caves and biomes seeking out the final boss. But what stands out about Noita is that every single pixel that appears on screen is simulated physically. Doing something like this is more suited to pixel art, I think, since there are fewer pixels in pixel art games. You can, theoretically, count them on the screen. With high-resolution games, there are thousands and thousands of pixels, and with 3D games, it's not even worth trying to count the pixels. We count triangles instead. With pixel art's lower resolution, it makes a feat like simulating every pixel physically more possible and less likely to crash your machine. Because of this, Noita's game world is much more interesting to explore since each pixel being simulated allows for the gameplay to be based on the emergent physics of the game. Along with the support of a clever updating system, the game world feels more fluid compared to games that have more static physics systems. Even though AAA games are pushing for fast, immersive 3D graphics, pixel art is definitely here to stay. Be it because it can be more accessible for indie teams, the nostalgia associated with it, the cool style and ambiance it can give a game, or the places that this style can be pushed. There are still a lot of possibilities that pixel art opens up, despite it not requiring today's latest and greatest technology like 3D games do. And it helps keep the game development space accessible for those with fewer resources or less skill and experience, which I think helps maintain one of the main appeals of indie development: the fact that anyone can do it with enough motivation.